The first time I met him, I was planning to rob him blind. Now, I can't even look at him without feeling like I'm the one being stripped bare. The city stretched out beneath me like a glittering Los Angeles at midnight, where dreams are currency and deception is an art form. I used to be good at lying. No, I used to survive by lying. And when you grow up on the wrong side of everything, you learn that charm is just another weapon. But I wasn't prepared for him. Elias Monroe, billionaire, reclusive, charismatic in that unnerving, quiet way, the kind of man whose presence makes the air rearrange itself. He didn't flaunt his wealth. It clung to him like gravity. And the night I stepped into his mansion pretending to be someone I wasn't, I thought I was in control. I wasn't. He saw right through me, not immediately, but deep down I think he knew. There was something in his eyes, something that said, "You can lie to everyone else, but not to me." I met Elias through an agency, at least that's what I told him. The truth was Messier. My name is Jordan Hayes, 27, broke, and one bad decision away from losing everything that still resembled a life. I'd been working a dozen odd jobs across LA, catering, deliveries, even fake date gigs, until my roommate introduced me to a business opportunity. It sounded simple. Befriend a lonely, wealthy client, earn trust, and get access to information valuable enough for blackmail or a payout. Nothing violent, nothing permanent. Just manipulation with a smile. And the target? Elias Monroe. A man who made millions in tech, disappeared from the public eye, and was rumored to be emotionally unstable after a scandal that cost him his company. Perfect prey, they said. But when I arrived at his estate, all glass and silence and ocean wind, something shifted. He wasn't what I expected. He was kind, detached, yes, but observant in a way that made me uncomfortable. His voice was low and deliberate, the kind of tone that made you want to tell him things you shouldn't. "Jordan, isn't it?" he said that first night, pouring 2 glasses of wine. I nodded, pretending not to stare. "I don't usually do this," he added. "Neither do I lied. We stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. He looked at them like a man who had everything but couldn't feel any of it. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be as easy as I thought. Days turned into weeks. My job was to learn his habits, his weaknesses, and report back. But the more time I spent with him, the more I started to forget which version of myself I was supposed to be. He'd invite me to dinners where he cooked badly but insisted on trying. He'd ask questions like, "What do you think people fear most? Losing money or being alone?" It wasn't small talk. Elias didn't do small talk. He watched people the way a scientist studies reactions, not judging, just curious. And I started wanting him to look at me longer, even if it meant he might see through the cracks. The nights were the hardest. The mansion was too quiet. Sometimes, I'd find him sitting on the terrace, staring into the dark like he was waiting for something to come back from it. One night I asked, "Why do you stay here all alone?" He didn't answer right away. The city glowed in the reflection of his eyes. "Because when you've lost yourself once," he finally said, "you stop trusting the world to help you find your way back." I didn't know why, but my throat tightened, because I understood. He thought I was some charming freelancer hired to help him with a new project, branding, marketing, whatever fake story I'd come up with. But the truth was, every word I spoke was a step deeper into the lie. And yet, for the first time, I wished it wasn't. People think guilt feels like fire, sharp and burning. It doesn't. It feels like gravity. A slow, heavy pull that drags you down every time you smile. The more I tried to keep the lie alive, the more Elias unknowingly broke it apart. He'd ask about my past, and I'd deflect. He'd notice when my hands shook while holding a glass, or when my eyes avoided his. Once, he touched my wrist gently, almost accidental, and I froze. "Jordan," he said quietly, "you don't have to pretend with me." For a second, I thought he knew everything. My heart nearly stopped. But then he smiled, faint and sad. "Everyone pretends, don't they?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I went outside, sat on the edge of the infinity pool, and watched the reflection of the stars ripple with every breath. The phone in my pocket buzzed a message from the people who'd sent me here. "You've been there long enough. Get the data and get out." He's starting to trust you. My hand shook. I deleted the message. A week later, it rained rare for Los Angeles. The storm hit hard, wind screaming against glass walls. I found Elias in his study, surrounded by papers, a half-empty glass beside him. He looked exhausted, vulnerable. Without thinking, I said, "You should rest." He glanced up, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "You care too much for someone who's just here for a paycheck." Cut deeper than it should have. "I'm not," I started, but the words caught. Because what could I say? "I'm not lying. I'm not using you. But the truth had started to hurt more than the lie ever did. He stood, walked toward me, and for the first time, there wasn't that careful distance he always kept. He stopped close enough that I could see the faint lines around his eyes, the way his breath hitched like he was afraid of what might happen next. "You remind me of who I was before I stopped believing in people," he said. I wanted to tell him everything right then. The scam, the setup, the guilt. But I didn't. I just stood there, paralyzed by the weight of what he saw in me, someone worth believing in. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight bleeding through the curtains and an ache I couldn't name. The world felt heavier, slower. Elias was already downstairs, talking on the phone in that calm, commanding tone that reminded me he was still far above my reach. But when he saw me, his expression softened. "Breakfast?" he asked. I nodded. We ate in silence. For once, it wasn't awkward, just quiet understanding. Then he said, almost casually, "There's a charity gala tonight. I could use company if you're free." I froze. A gala meant people, cameras, the risk of exposure, but also the chance to see him in his world, not the isolated fortress he'd built around himself. So I said yes. That night, when I saw him in his black tuxedo, something inside me cracked open. He looked every bit the man I was supposed to deceive, powerful, untouchable, and yet, when he turned to me, the smile that flickered on his face was real. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to win. I wanted to deserve him. Everything unraveled at that gala. A familiar voice behind me said, Well, Jordan Hayes. Didn't expect to see you here with him." It was Mason, the same guy who'd recruited me for the job. The one who'd sent that message. He smiled like a vulture in a velvet suit. Elias turned toward us, curious. "You two know each other?" And in that moment, the whole world tilted. My pulse roared in my ears. I tried to lie, to think of something, anything, but Mason's grin widened. "Oh, he knows me," he said, savoring every word. "We used to work together. Jordan's got quite the talent for making people trust him." The look Elias gave me then wasn't anger. It was worse. It was disappointment. A quiet, shattering kind of silence that said he'd known all along but hoped to be wrong. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The moment stretched like a blade, silent, sharp, and impossible to escape. Elias's eyes didn't burn with anger. They dimmed. That was somehow worse. Because when someone like him goes quiet, it means you've broken something that words can't fix. Mason's smirk hovered between us like smoke. "Don't look so surprised," he said, swirling his champagne. "You didn't really think your little fairy tale was going to last, did you, Jordan?" "Enough," Elias said softly. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried authority that cut through the noise of the gala. The crowd kept mingling, unaware of the storm brewing in the corner. Elias turned to me. "Is it true?" My throat closed. Could have lied again. I'd lied my whole life, but this time I couldn't. Not to him. "Yes," I whispered. "But it's not." He didn't wait for me to finish. He stepped back, his jaw tightening. "I see." Just 2 words. And yet, they felt like the end of everything. He left without another word. The echo of his absence was louder than the music, louder than Mason's chuckle behind me. "You had one job," Mason hissed as he leaned close. "Now it's ruined. Do you even realize what you've done?" I shoved past him, my heartbeat pounding like gunfire in my chest. None of it mattered anymore, the money, the deal, the lies. I just needed to find Elias. Outside, the rain had started again. Ella never knew how to rain gently. It came down like it was trying to wash the city clean of its sins. I searched the parking lot, the sidewalks, anywhere but his car was gone. By the time I reached his mansion, it was past midnight. The gates were locked, the windows dark. "Elias!" I shouted through the downpour, slamming my hands against the gate. "Please, just let me explain." Only silence answered. So I stood there, drenched and shaking, watching the lights of his house flicker like fading hope. The next few days passed in a blur of regret. He didn't call, didn't answer my texts, didn't open the door when I showed up again and again. I left letters in his mailbox, apologies, confessions, words that meant nothing because they came too late. Each morning, I'd sit in my small apartment, staring at the same skyline he once showed me from his terrace, and wonder when exactly I lost control. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was grief. I'd never believed in soulmates. That word always sounded like something rich people said when they were bored of being lonely, but with Elias, it felt real. He'd seen something in me I didn't know existed. And now he was gone because I'd built our story on a lie. I tried to go back to work, but nothing fit. Every interaction felt fake. Every smile a betrayal. Mason kept calling, demanding explanations, but I ignored him. Then, one night, I received a message from an unknown number. "If you're done pretending, meet me where it started." My heart stuttered. The mansion. The gate was open this time. The house was dimly lit, quiet, too quiet. I stepped inside, half expecting security to throw me out. But there he was, standing by the same window where we'd shared our first glass of wine, watching the rain fall in streaks of silver across the glass. He didn't turn when I entered. "Elias." My voice cracked. "You're persistent," he said. "I'll give you that." I swallowed hard. I didn't come for money, or to finish what Mason wanted. I came because I can't live with what I did. He turned then, slowly. His expression was unreadable. "Why?" "Because you're the first person who ever looked at me like I wasn't just some con artist trying to survive. You made me want to be better." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe, or recognition. "Funny," he said, voice low. "That's exactly how I ended up losing everything the first time." He walked past me, poured himself a drink, then another. "Do you even know why I became a recluse? Why I stopped trusting anyone?" I hesitated. "The scandal." He gave a humorless laugh. "They said I embezzled from my own company. The truth is, I trusted someone who used me. Someone I loved." The words hit like a mirror shattering. "So when you showed up bright, charming, pretending to care, I thought maybe I could try again. That maybe people weren't all the same." I took a shaky step closer. "Elias." Stop." His voice cracked for the first time. "You don't get to say my name like that anymore." The silence that followed was suffocating. He turned back to the window. "You should go." But I couldn't. Instead, I whispered, "I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. But I'll spend every day proving that I'm not the same person who walked into your life with a plan to destroy it." He didn't answer. I left without another word, but not without hope. Because the fact that he'd let me in at all meant something hadn't completely died. Months passed. I stayed away, but never stopped thinking of him. I started working legitimately freelance design jobs, marketing gigs, anything to keep myself grounded. Sometimes I'd catch news about him, charity events, tech conferences, proof that he was rebuilding slowly, that he was healing, maybe, and I tried to do the same. But healing isn't linear. Some nights, I'd wake up thinking I heard his voice. Some days, I'd pass by the coffee shop we'd once gone to and feel my chest tighten like an old wound reopening. Then one morning I got a call. "Mr. Hayes?" a woman's voice said. "Mr. Monroe would like to see you." For a long moment, I just sat there, unable to breathe. When I arrived at the mansion, it looked different. Warmer. There were new plants by the terrace, soft jazz playing somewhere in the background. Elias stood in the living room, wearing a gray sweater instead of his usual suits. He looked human. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "Didn't think I deserved to." Maybe you don't, he said, not cruelly, just honest. But I wanted to talk. We sat opposite each other. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, I've had time to think. About what happened. About you. I waited, heart pounding. I won't lie, Jordan. What you did hurt. But so did living without you. I blinked. You're saying you? I'm saying that sometimes forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about believing that people can change. The words cracked something open inside me. I have changed, I said, voice trembling. Because of you. He studied me for a long moment. Then prove it. Not with promises. With time. And so we began again, carefully, cautiously. Not as lovers. Not yet. As two people trying to rebuild something that might never be what it was, but could still be real. I worked with him on a new project, a nonprofit for underprivileged youth learning tech skills. The irony wasn't lost on me. A man who'd lost everything because of betrayal, and another who'd been defined by deceit, now working to give others a better chance. Every meeting, every shared glance, felt like a quiet test. And slowly, day by day, trust began to grow where lies once lived. Sometimes he'd smile, a real one. Other times we'd fall into old patterns. Sarcasm, late-night arguments about ethics and truth. But even those moments felt alive. One evening, after a long day at the office, I found him sitting outside again, watching the sunset over the city. You ever wonder, I asked, if we were supposed to meet like this, I mean? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I don't believe in fate, but I believe in second chances. And somehow, you keep showing up where I least expect you. The wind carried the scent of the ocean. I looked at him, at the faint light catching the edges of his profile, and realized something simple but profound. I'd fallen in love with him long before I even knew what love meant. Months later, after a long charity event, Elias drove us back to the mansion. The road was quiet, the night soft around us. He spoke first. Do you still think about the night we met? I smiled faintly. Every day. He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months. You were terrible at lying, you know? I was nervous, I said. You were intimidating. He glanced at me, eyes warm. And yet, here you are. The car stopped at a red light. He turned to face me fully. Jordan, he said quietly, do you believe people like us, people who've made mistakes, deserve to be happy? Yes, I whispered. Because otherwise, what's the point of learning to love at all? When the light turned green, he didn't move. He reached across the console, his hand brushing mine, tentative, fragile, like testing a bridge rebuilt over water. I didn't pull away, and for the first time, there was no lie left between us. Just truth. Just us. The months that followed felt like breathing after nearly drowning. Every day still carried weight. But now there was light breaking through it. Elias and I worked side by side on the nonprofit project, and though our conversations were mostly professional, there was a quiet understanding beneath every word. We'd both seen what deceit could destroy. Now we were learning what truth could rebuild. Still, some scars refused to fade. There were nights when I'd catch him staring at the city skyline, his expression distant, like he was afraid to believe in peace. And sometimes, when his phone buzzed and he didn't answer, I'd feel that old fear rise in me again. What if this isn't real? What if it all falls apart again? But healing isn't about never doubting, it's about choosing to stay, even when you do. One morning, I walked into the office and froze. Mason was there. He sat casually in the lobby, dressed sharp as ever, with that same smirk that once haunted my nightmares. Jordan, he said, standing. Long time no see. My stomach tightened. What are you doing here? Relax, he said, spreading his hands. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here for business. Elias appeared from his office just then, composed as always, though I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes when he saw Mason. Mr. Monroe, Mason greeted smoothly. I believe we have a proposal to discuss, a merger of sorts. You see, I'm representing a client interested in partnering with your nonprofit. It was the kind of move only someone like Mason would pull, dressing manipulation in the language of opportunity. Elias looked at him, then at me. His gaze held no accusation, only quiet strength. "Jordan," he said, "stay." So I did. We sat through the presentation. Mason talked numbers, partnerships, future benefits. But every word was laced with threat, subtle, careful. He wanted something. When he finished, Elias folded his hands. "It's impressive," he said calmly. "But I'm not interested." Mason smiled tightly. "You might want to reconsider. You and your associate here have a history that could become very public if you're not careful." I felt my pulse spike, but Elias didn't flinch. He just leaned back, eyes cold. "You've already taken enough from me once. You won't do it again." Then, without looking at me, he added, "And you can tell whoever sent you integrity can't be bought." Mason's smile faded. He stood, collected his papers, and left without another word. After Mason left, the silence between us was heavy. "You didn't have to protect me," I said quietly. Elias looked at me, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting us." Those words hit harder than I expected. But even then, part of me still struggled with guilt. The past felt like an anchor I couldn't quite cut loose. That night, as I walked home, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and silver. I thought about the first time I'd seen him, the arrogance I'd worn like armor, the lies I'd built to survive. And now, here I was, terrified of losing something I never deserved in the first place. When I reached my apartment, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single photograph, me and Elias at the gala, standing close, smiling. On the back was a note in Mason's handwriting. "People like us don't get redemption. Don't forget that." I sat down hard, the photo trembling in my hands. For the first time in months, I wanted to disappear again, to run, like I always did. But then I thought of Elias, standing firm against the man who'd once destroyed his life. He hadn't run. He'd rebuilt. Maybe I could too. The next morning, I went to the mansion. I didn't text first, didn't call. I needed him to hear it from me directly. When he opened the door, surprise flickered across his face, then concern. "Jordan? What happened?" "I need to tell you something," I said, stepping inside. "All of it. Every detail. No more half-truths." He nodded slowly. "Go on." So I did. I told him everything: the agency, the plan, how Mason had found me when I was broke and desperate, how every choice I made afterward had been tangled between survival and shame. I told him how every moment we'd shared had been real for me, even if it started with a lie. When I finished, I expected him to walk away again. But he didn't. He just stood there, silent, his gaze steady. Finally, he said, "You've already told me most of this." "I know," I said, "but I needed to say it again. Not to get forgiveness. To prove I'm not hiding anymore." He studied me for a long time, then walked to the window, that same window where everything had once fallen apart. "You've changed," he said softly. "I wasn't sure I believed it before, but I do now." When he turned back, there was no anger left, only quiet acceptance. "Redemption isn't something people give you, Jordan. It's something you earn when you stop running from yourself." I felt tears sting my eyes, but I smiled anyway. Then maybe I'm finally learning how to stay. The months that followed were simple, and that simplicity felt like freedom. Mason vanished after that day. The agency disbanded. I never heard from them again. Sometimes I'd half expect him to show up, but he never did. And eventually, the silence stopped feeling like fear and started feeling like peace. Elias's nonprofit flourished. We opened community centers in 3 cities, teaching coding, design, and digital literacy to kids who'd grown up like I did, overlooked, underestimated, fighting invisible wars just to survive. Watching them reminded me of something Elias once said: "When you've lost yourself once, you stop trusting the world to help you find your way back." Now, we were helping others find their way before they ever got lost. Every evening, when the work was done, we'd sit on the terrace and watch the sunset. Sometimes we talked about the future. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Silence between us now wasn't a punishment. It was comfort. One evening, after a long day of teaching, Elias brought out 2 glasses of iced tea, not wine this time. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met? He asked. I thought for a moment. You'd probably be living in peace, and I'd still be lying to survive. He smiled faintly. Then I guess I'm glad we did. There was no grand confession, no dramatic gesture, just that. A simple sentence that carried everything we'd fought through. Because love, real love, isn't built on perfection. It's built on persistence. On choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard. He leaned back, eyes on the horizon. You once said you came into my life with a plan. Funny thing is, I think you ended up saving mine instead. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't feel unworthy. I just felt home. A year later, we stood on stage at a youth conference, presenting the success of the foundation. Cameras flashed. Applause filled the room. But all I could think about was how far we'd come from that night of lies and rain. After the speech, a young boy came up to me. He looked nervous, holding a worn-out notebook. Mr. Hayes, he said, I wanted to say thank you. Before I came here, I didn't think people like me could do anything that mattered. I smiled and took his hand. You already matter. You just needed a place to see it. When he walked away, Elias came up beside me, his voice quiet. You were talking to him the way I once talked to you. I laughed softly. Guess I learned from the best. That night, we returned to the rooftop terrace, the same place where everything had started years ago. The city stretched beneath us, endless and alive. The breeze was cool, carrying the scent of rain. You ever notice, I said, that the city never really sleeps? It just changes rhythm. Elias nodded. Like people. We stood there in silence, watching the lights shimmer. Somewhere below, a siren wailed distant, fading. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I didn't feel like a con artist or a ghost. I felt whole. Elias turned to me, eyes soft. You once said I held your soul, he murmured. But the truth is, you helped me find mine again. I smiled. Then maybe that's what love really is, not losing yourself in someone else, but finding the courage to be seen. The wind carried his quiet laugh. For someone who started out lying for a living, you've become remarkably good at telling the truth. We stood together, the city glowing beneath our feet. And for the first time, the world didn't feel like something we needed to escape. It felt like something we'd finally earned. Years later, people would talk about Elias Monroe, the man who rebuilt his empire not on profit, but on purpose. They'd mention the mysterious partner who stood beside him, who turned a scandal into a movement that changed lives. But behind the headlines and the success, there was just us two men who'd once been broken by lies, now defined by truth. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when the world outside felt too loud, we'd look out over the city and remember where it all began, a con that became a confession, a lie that became a life. Because in the end, redemption isn't found in perfection. It's found in the choice to love, even when you've seen the worst of yourself. And we chose. Every single day. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.